In just a second, I'll bring her back on. So what we want to talk about is scheduling tonight, and scheduling for unschedulers. And this is really an important topic because most of us have some misunderstandings about scheduling. And the misunderstandings come by people who are, unschooled, unscheduled, anything, free, spontaneous, bohemian, whatever they are, totally sporadic, living life to the fullest. And then there are the obsessive and compulsive people that are major scheduled. So somewhere in between those two is a bit reality. And I can tell you, having 5 children and getting them from birth to college to be able to learn, prepare, and wind up doing plenty well in college had to have something to do with scheduling. I'm going to tell you, not all of our children were naturally bent to scheduling. We'll talk about that. Here's what I want to do before I start sharing, or Jody and I start sharing some of the thoughts we have. I want you to type in, if you would, there's a live chat thing over here. See if I can make it work. Somewhere, a live chat, click here. I see all kinds of attendees. That's cool. So somewhere in here is the chat button. And if you would, if you don't mind, would you please type in something that would be a question you have about scheduling. In other words, I'd rather have some questions out there before we start talking about it. And if we'll do that, Jody, I have you muted right now, so because it automatically goes to you back and forth if you move. So I'm waiting to try to explain this, then I'll bring you in. So if you can see the hello, would you please type in, you at least see that. If you type in where you're from, that'd be really cool. I won't, you're not going to display or give up any secrets of the universe. The Pentagon's not coming after you. This is all legit and cool and okay. But what I want to hear are questions you have about scheduling. So Jody, I'm going to show you in the broadcast now. You there? She's muted. I think you might have to unmute yourself, honey.
How about that?
There you go.
Ta-da!
Ta-da. You're a little close. You might want to back up from it and let that little camera focus a little bit. But what we're looking for is for an opportunity for people to share quickly what questions they have about scheduling. What is it? What things that are going through your mind? Because if we can get those out in the open up front, then what we share, we can make sure we address those things. Can you see the chat feature, Jody?
Yes.
Do you see me saying hello?
No.
Okay, so I must have used an entirely different chat. Okay, I'm in the right chat. I got somebody from Nectar, Alabama. Oh my gosh, where is Nectar, Alabama? I grew up in Anniston. Jody's from Montgomery. We met in Tuscaloosa. I've campaigned in every city in that state for Daddy. I've got Kathy from St. Louis. Awesome. My daughter works for the St. Louis Cardinals. 18. So what I'm wanting to know is A, where Nectar, Alabama is, and B, I see Powder Springs, Georgia. That's quite cool. And I have one question about scheduling. So any questions you have about scheduling? It may just be, how do you make it work with kids who are so different? Or how do you keep from overdoing it? Or I've never seen a schedule actually work. How do you get it to work? Any of those questions are great. So, and somebody's hearing volume, double volume. So you may need to turn your volume off. I don't know. It should be better now. Jody, I don't hear you. So we'll see. We were doing an echo, so I'm sure she heard that. All right, so I see anything else you want to add, but any questions you've got about scheduling, you post them anytime you want to, sooner the better. But I want to get started. And by the way, we can talk about anything you want to tonight, but I want to do this intro little conversation about scheduling because most of us are about to launch off into August, planning, getting ready for school. School's going to start the beginning of September, going to start later. Um, and so as a result, it's clearly in our mind. So let me read some of these questions I'm getting. They're starting to come through. Technology's working. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So here are some things we've got. Scheduling multiple ages. Well, whew, I'm getting too many now. Let me go back through them. Scheduling with multiple ages, 2 through 14. What a great problem. And it is a serious challenge. Need ideas for scheduling that are largely student directed, and that was a big thing with us because we were trying to design a game where we don't have to monitor them and be constantly dealing with these kids and straightening them out, being on their case constantly. So I think the sound went back perfect. That's cool. Hello, Jody and Dr. Libran. How do you adhere to the schedule? I don't have a problem making a schedule. What a great point.
Look good.
But sometimes I have a hard time sticking to it. Thank you from Virginia. Jody, can you see all these?
Yes.
So Nectar's in north central near Coleman. There you go. Okay, so I got it. So I'm going to go up to Decatur. I'm going to go to Huntsville. I'm going to run down to Birmingham for all the big things. And interested in just keeping a schedule. So let me talk about schedules first. These are great. If you have a question, throw it out there, and we'll do our best to get to it. Here's our challenge with scheduling, and it's a paradigm problem. And by paradigm, I mean it's the way we think about it. For example, in education, if you think that you've got to teach your child, and offer your child everything the public school offers, if you're homeschooled, then you have a paradigm problem because there's no way you as a single person can compete with an entire school system, multi-million-dollar facility, budget, teachers, etc. You can't do that. You have to do something different. So you have to think in a different way. That's what I'm talking about, a paradigm. If you think that children are blank slates and you've got to teach them everything, and unless you teach them, they can't learn, then that's going to drive you in a direction. I remember some years ago, many years ago, computers were just kicking in, and I remember we were at dinner with some folks at homeschooled, and the mom was sharing that she was getting her daughter doing computer programming, probably BASIC or Fortran or Cobalt, or I don't know what she was, something way back. And I told her, I said, I don't think that's going to be necessary because most kids will learn to run a computer without your help. In fact, how do they do that? And if they're interested in programming, they'll do programming. If you want to program them, that's great. But the challenge even back then was it's moving so fast, whatever she does in programming ain't going to matter. It's not going to help her. This was a 7th grader. I'm not talking about late high school towards college. So that paradigm that says they have to know how to program to run a computer turned out to not be an accurate story. And we could sort of tell that back then. It's not that mom was just being diligent, sometimes too diligent. So what I'm getting at is the way you think about things affects what actions you take, strategies set up, actions you take. Now, say that because of scheduling. Here's the trick. And if you're going to write anything down, this would be the thing to write down. All of us follow some kind of schedule. It's unavoidable. All of us follow some kind of schedule. It's unavoidable. And once you realize that, then it's a matter of working with what you're doing. See, most of us, for some reason, think, oh, I'm so unscheduled, and we beat ourselves up. Drat, I don't have a good flailing stick, but we're sitting there beating ourselves. I'm going over there. We're beating ourselves up and frustrated with ourselves and feel like we're failing and doing a poor job. And don't let me take that away from you. You may be doing a poor job. I don't want to take that away. But chances are it's not as bad as you think. And once you get the fact that no matter how you go, there's some schedule. Even when you say, we don't have a time to get started. Well, that's a schedule decision. We don't have a time to end. That's a schedule decision. We take things in the order the child desires to look at it. That's still a schedule. You've actually set up something that has a schedule to it. And what schedule is talking about, it's related to the time-space continuum. Okay, this is all Star Trek I'm going to do tonight. The time-space continuum means it's a continuum, right? It goes in an order, and that means it's linear. There are pieces that this, then, and we do this, and we do this, and we do this, and we do this. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about how that relates to scheduling. Where we first learned really about scheduling, probably as a couple, was in learning to schedule our babies. This may meet with controversy. It's totally cool. It's okay to disagree with everything we say here. But the truth is that we learned how, from some older, wiser people, how to move our babies into sleeping through the night. And I can tell you, we've had 5 children, and all 5 of them slept through the night from 6 weeks old and onward. At least 6, some sooner, but at least 6 weeks old and onward. And that, that dynamic was a scheduling dynamic. And if you work with a child that you feed on demand and let them figure out their own sleep schedule, that's scheduling too. So the reality is you can't escape it. Okay, so now once you know you can't escape it, you can start figuring out, okay, so how do I work with it? By the way, we have someone, the record for the person furthest away right now, which is so cool, is someone in Southeast Brazil. And my Portuguese is not very good, but Jody's is. She works with a lady that grew up in Brazil. So
It's Brazil.
yeah, Brazil. So she'll kick that in for you, Carlos, in a moment. Okay, so I blabbed about scheduling. Jody, what of what I've said so far would you like to say or add or augment or correct? You're free to disagree too.
Well, no. Everybody's doing a schedule. Yours just might be an unscheduled or a loose schedule or a change every day schedule, but you're doing things in order.
Yeah, there's some kind of sequence going on. And once you admit that, great freedom can come into your life. So what we're trying to wrestle with are these questions, like how do, not so much how I think that's true. I think most of us can kind of figure out a schedule. It's just we don't seem to figure out one that works, or we don't figure out how to make it work. So let's talk about that for just a moment. How, Jody, I'm going to get you, you hate to be on the spot, so you tell what you remember. And there's one key thing I know we went through that was a big change. But let's talk about scheduling babies just sleeping through the night. I mean, that's innocent enough. We're not talking about schooling or anything magic, though we have questions about from 2-year-old to 14. So how'd you pull that off?
I pulled that off because the how was with you, with your help. We made a plan when they were needed to eat, when they needed to sleep. I mean, the basic things babies eat, sleep, and be active. And you kind of do those 3 things in some kind of routine, some kind of order. And, throw in bath. And so we worked around, I mean, at the age-wise, of course, a tiny baby's going to eat more often. And they're
right. So what Jody's saying is right. You may need to get that microphone. You remember talked about using it.
I'm hearing me. That's one thing. Reason I'm hesitating.
So well, if you use the microphone, it'd be great. So here's the trick. What we didn't do exactly was we did not have the child. We didn't have our children on a schedule in that we were exactly saying, at 8 o'clock they're going to eat, and then at 12 they're going to eat, and then whatever. We may have put that in there or some pieces, but what we were doing is we were scheduling a sequence. It wasn't so clock oriented, it was sequence oriented. So with the babies, what we were doing is babies wake up and eat, right? They wake up and eat, and so they wake up, they eat. After they eat, I think Jody had something like a playtime. And so they played. This obviously didn't involve me that much. And then after a certain amount of play time, you know what? There was bath time. And so they'd take a bath, and then they might have a settle down time or something, I don't know. And then another maybe eat and go to bedtime, or maybe they take a nap before it. But it was kind of what we were thinking schedule wise then had more to do with the sequence rather than the amount of time. Now, as children get older, you can use time dynamics in there too. But it's a matter of a sequence in time. That's what we were originally trying to understand. And that's, I think, really important. So that you understand first, like in homeschooling, the sequence you're taking the kids through. In our conviction, we were basically teaching kids to read and to write and to do arithmetic, right? So in our minds, we use something called the Robinson curriculum. And Art basically suggested that you start with math, and then you do probably writing, and then you do reading. And if you do that sequence, what he was saying is if a child learns to get up in the morning and do the most mentally rigorous thing that he or she can do first thing, then there's going to be great magic in their life of being able to conquer the most difficult thing first in the morning. While I agreed with him about that, in time, I kind of rethought it and decided that actually the most rigorous thing is writing. Math is not as hard as writing. Writing's hard, don't get me wrong, but it's only hard because you're doing new problems every day. If you kept doing the same problems every day or the same kind of math, boring. Writing, however, you're in a paragraph. Do you know how many decisions you're making about the words and the use and the grammar and the pieces? Your brain is zipping along, I promise you. And so being inventive, creating something fresh, something new, not necessarily going through a formula, allowing your brain to lay out words in order to create images and ideas and thoughts. Man, that's cool, exciting, and tough. So we moved writing to the beginning. But in our day, it was basically we worked out a sequence. We'd do writing, and then we'd do math, and then we do reading. In the course of time, we adjusted that. We'd do writing, then we'd do math, then we'd do reading, then we'd do math, and we'd do reading, if I remember the correct sequence, something like that. And so as a result, we nailed down the sequence first before we even worried about the time involved. Jody, you may still be muted, but I wanted to throw you back in.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. I'm still echoing or not?
No.
Okay, good. And yes, sequence of those things, and then the lot. So we thought logically about how that would work out. And
I take that back. For some reason, you are echoing. Is it plugged into the headset place on the computer?
Yes, because I'm hearing you through my earphones.
That's strange. You might want to, at some point, walk upstairs, but finish this point first. Maybe we're too close to each other. So finish your thought. That. It's okay.
Okay. No, just sorry. Adding in, like, okay, so we wanted him to do 30 minutes of a physical activity each day, basketball, whatever we were doing. So when would be the best slot for that? Kind of shaking up their brain, their brains a little bit, giving them a break. And so, thinking through when's the best time to slip in something like physical education or breaks. When's the best time for breaks in between things? And just think, still going along with the sequence.
Exactly. There's a good piece to it, because so once we had the basic frame involved, we could start adding in other pieces. So I guess I would argue that step one is recognizing that you personally use a schedule anyway. You can't avoid it. Second, you really want to figure out the sequence of what you're doing. So even if you're a football coach, or soccer coach. You want to think about, what am I trying to do with the kids? And what I did when I played football, the sequence was warm up. So we got our bodies and muscles stretched and awake, might run a lap or two, do some calisthenics. And then we would generally divide up into our groups, defense, offense, whoever, and do some kind of drills, some kind of something like that. And then the later part of practice, we would run scrimmage. And so we're playing an actual semi-game, running plays and practicing them. And then the last part, we'd run laps again before we headed to the gym, to the locker room. So it's a sequence that's in place. And then you figure out, how long do I want to spend on those things? That's actually I'd argue, the simplest way you could possibly imagine doing such a thing as scheduling. So, Jody, you even look better up there. My goodness.
All right. Are you hearing echoing now?
Yeah. No.
How's that going? Okay, good.
Whose picture is behind you?
Well, that's one of Tripp's paintings.
Our son got a degree in art from the University of Texas in Austin. And so his stuff's scattered around, but the rest of them painted too. So I don't want to dismiss that. So on scheduling, here's I think the third thing I would mention, the kind of the ultimate secret. I mean, you obviously have to plan it out and then do it. And I'm suggesting you figure out a sequence, and then you start putting time frames in it. And time frames are important because limits create focus. Unless you have a limit of, you have this amount of time, you won't see the same thing produced. I remember Forrest, I'll give you an example. Forrest one time was going to sit out on our little terrace out back and come up with some ideas for a character, some book or something he was working on. And the way he was approaching it, he didn't sound like he wanted to spend that much time on it, but he was about to spend a good hour or so, excuse me. And I said, I'll show you a trick if you'd like to see it. And he said, okay. And I sent him down. I said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to write out your main characters and a description about each of them in 5 minutes. And I'm going to time you. Ready, go. Click my phone clock. And it started counting. And he got going. And by the time he was through, he had filled up a page and a half. There's something magic about those time constraints if people buy into them. If they don't, there's no consequence or whatever. But this is what we know about testing and about all kinds of work, that is Parkinson's law in the business world. They talk about this, that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. That's the basic rule. So if you give a lot of time, things take longer. Now you can over condense it, and you don't want to stress everybody out, but you do want to come back over and lay in time blocks about how long it should take. That's the schedule. But here's what I want to share to be the secret, and from here we'll just talk about it. The secret of scheduling, honestly, is to admit to yourself and embrace the reality that you personally very likely cannot get to the schedule you want the first day. Most people, for some reason, by the way, some of you are great schedulers. In fact, most of the great schedulers didn't join us because they didn't think it pertained to them. But they're great schedulers, and sometimes they're overdo it and they are not flexible, and it's a little irritating, but that's okay. They still, get it done their way, and you're going to get it done your way. I'm not suggesting you follow our schedule. I rarely even tell it to people. You got to figure out your schedule. However, if you'll do this, set up your schedule. The problem is I don't have a problem making schedule, but sometimes I have a hard time sticking to it. Well, that's because you're trying to stick to it the first day, second day, third day perfectly. And the reason I say that is because I've fooled with this a long time, and this is what people do. They're trying to just say, bam, I've got a new habit. Habits don't tend to work that way. We want to work ourselves towards it. Do you think the children we have were eating on a 4-hour schedule, more or less, or sleeping through the night the first night we tried it? No. Now, we did cheat, and had some good results. And the cheat was at 6 weeks, they normally drop a feeding. So we kind of coaxed them to roughly a 4-hour pattern. And then we would cut the middle of the night feeding out, see how that went. The first time we tried it, Trip, cut it out. I went in there, I powdered him, I changed his diaper, acted like we did some things, you know, and put him back down, and he laid there, and I went back in the bedroom, got in bed, and put my legs over Jody so she wouldn't be able to get up. And Trip suddenly went, wait a minute. Okay, I cried. Somebody came in, they tended to me, but I didn't eat. And he went, wah, and he cried. And I kid you not, if he cried for 2 minutes, I don't believe it. He cried for about a minute, minute and a half. Yeah, no, I don't even mean cried, complained. And then he got quiet and went to sleep. The second night with Trip, we woke up at 6 in the morning and thought he had died, our first child, because he'd slept through the whole night and nothing woke us, and we thought something was wrong. We dashed in there to see, is he breathing? Is he breathing? And with newborns, you can't tell if they're breathing. You get close and they breathe so shallow, you need a mirror or something. Until about the third baby, you figure out, oh, if they're pink, they're breathing. If they're gray or blue, not breathing. Once you know that, you can calm down a great deal. I just want to tell you. So it's that game, it's that story and play and scheduling that what you want to do is set up your schedule, and you want to work toward it. So set a date about 6 weeks out or 2 months out. And the trick to that date is you want to tell the kids or yourself or both that at that date, you put in the calendar, we're going to reevaluate it and see how the schedule is working. And so there's a constant adjustment and correction in the game. And I'll end with this thing and see whatever, Jody, you'd like to add. But I mean, this point. But the last point is this. You need to give up worshiping the God of excellence. I know that sounds like heresy, but stay with me for a second. The God of excellence is a cruel master, and he is kin to the God of perfection. And they both serve the God of ideals. And ideals and perfection and excellence all are a striving towards an impossibility. Because no matter what you do, you can do a little better. No matter what you do, you can do a little better. And if you do that, you'll make people despair. I remember my dad, when I got out of my master's program, I told him I graduated with honors with a 3.62. His first words to me were, why didn't you make a 4.0? See, you could always do better. He would say, do your best, and then you could always do better. So that left me a little bit of a perfectionist. Hadn't affected me at all, you know. But as you get over these things and you kind of wake up, you realize what you want to do is serve quality, not excellence. Quality. Because it means you start where you are, like with the way you schedule, and then you're looking to, how can I improve this? And then how can I improve it a little more? And how can I improve it a little more? This is why Toyotas and Hondas actually work like they do, way before the American car caught up to it. It was about quality. Quality is a sequence of just simply looking at, here's where we are, how can we make this a little better? So you want to start with a schedule, and you want to say, how do we make this a little better? That's all you're going for. And if you'll do that, set that date out there in about 2 months, that gives everybody permission to play along because they know they're not trapped. And then you're going to sit down, evaluate it, figure out how to tweak it a little bit, and you'll be off to the races. You'll start with an okay schedule, and you'll make it a little better. And then that better schedule, you'll make a little better. And that little better schedule, you make a little better. This is the best I know of how it works. And it's where the challenge is and where the hope is. And I can tell you this, schedules, you know, getting a sequence in your day and some sense of the time, they're magic for calming children down because they know what's happening. They know how it works. Our kids would go on vacation, go be with their grandparents, and honestly, they got kind of weird because they didn't know how the world worked, and they came back and you could see them settle back in, not immediately, settle back into their blessed sequence or schedule. And it was, you know, quite a joy for them to catch on to that. We used to have kids that love to be spontaneous. They don't like to be boxed in. I get that, but they're still following a schedule. Jody?
Ooh, a couple of different things. One being that if you are working toward a schedule, when you do get off, don't panic, don't freak out, just get back on as soon as you can. Vacations are, like Fred was just saying, are quite that way. It would take a couple of days to get us back in the groove of things, and kids really do like schedules. They like to know what's next, what's next, what's next, and we would type up our schedules and post them. That's another thing. You can type up your schedule, have it on the fridge, so that everybody knows what's going on when. And I know the different ages can affect things, but one thing that we always did is we got the children woke up at the same time every day, and always. I mean, and that has been a big thing. And I know some people, well, it's my kid, I've got one that doesn't really get going till 9, and I got another one that likes to get up at 6:30 and start working. You are in charge of training your children, and part of all of this is just that training. I mean, when they grow up and have jobs, they don't get to choose when they have to be at work. Most of jobs and school classes, you don't necessarily get to always choose what time your class is going to be. You're training them to get up, get going, be productive. We had another thing we had going on with each segment of homeschool. We gave them there was a set time. This is the time for math. This is time for reading. If they were dawdling and went over, what we did was we went ahead and went to the next subject, and then they had to kind of make that up as post-school or homework. So that kept them in, okay, I've got an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is to get this done, and we're not going to stretch it out for 3 hours. That's and that was helpful to our kids to focus and have those limits. So I was just talking to a new mother today, and she's not a very scheduled person, but she seems to intuitively know that her baby does better when she's on a schedule. And
right. And what we mean by schedule, I just want to stress it, is a sequence that works through time, and it may relate to the clock or it may not. That's not the determiner. So when you try to schedule things by the clock rather than doing the sequence first, you can frustrate yourself, because most of us don't include margin, etc. But this mom, I know who she's talking about, also understands that, and she would be well served to create a sequence of what she's doing with her baby on a daily basis. Is that right, Jody?
Right. And if you do, just one of the things, Fred said, if you do put the time limits in there after you've gotten the sequence, do put in margin, just like Fred's saying. Have some buffer time. But I will say, also kind of watch some of that. It's easy for a 5-minute break to turn into all of a sudden it's been 20 minutes. And that's something, just like somebody was saying earlier, they want their children to self-regulate themselves. They don't want to be watching their kids the whole time and having a timer in their hand and all. And that's something you work with your kids with, and it's kind of a trust issue and an honesty issue and all those things kind of mixed in together. So.
All right, cool. Excellent. So now we need questions. Tell us what exactly you're wondering about now. I mean, we basically gave you an idea, and it's to understand you're on a schedule yourself, no matter what you think. You want to set up a sequence of events. You then probably want to add time to it. And you want to give yourself time, 6 weeks, 2 months, to work yourself towards it. Don't expect yourself to follow it perfectly at the beginning. Jody pointed out posting a copy of it is brilliant. You need to do that. and say, this is what we're aiming to. In a couple of months, we're going to reevaluate this and see how it's working for us. And we're going to work toward that schedule. So
And
that
the
would be
person with
right.
the different age, the variety of ages, 2 to 16, obviously, 2-year-old's not doing everything the 16-year-old's doing at all. I mean, they're not all doing the same thing at the same time, but roughly, there's the family can coordinate. When the little ones were napping, that's when I taught the first kindergartners and the first graders. That's when I taught them to read and worked with them on their individual things, and that worked out. And even once they didn't have a nap time anymore, they still had quiet time. And if we were in the schoolroom, our little ones learned to be in the schoolroom with us doing quiet activities, and they knew roughly kind of how the morning went. They knew, when we did what and when things changed to different things, and when the kids went off to their own rooms to do their own work, or when we were all together reading, the baby was in there with us. And you can still, even though everybody's not doing the exact same thing at the exact same time, there's still a flow, there's still a sequence.
Yeah, that is really quite important. Can you see me, Jody?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, the way project managers do this on big projects like oil and gas, creating a rig, drilling, and all the rest, is they'll figure out things in parallel. So they figure out this schedule, and there are ways they do this with PERT charts will show a critical mass, but a Gantt chart will show how you have to complete one thing for another. Don't think about all that, but simply realize that you may need to work out the sequence for your 2-year-old and the sequence for your 14-year-old separately. And then when you put them together, you can start make sense of what Jody just said. Oh, I can do these things during this and these things during this. So you sort of divide and conquer. You think through the options and your goals with each child, and then you integrate the system. For us, mostly it was what we're working towards is to get everybody on the pattern that we eventually wanted them to be on. So by the time you're, what would you say, Jody, 9 or 10? Was everybody doing the same thing?
Probably even before that, but
Okay, I don't know.
yeah, right. Basically it'd be like once they knew how to read. So, maybe 7 or 8, then everybody was on the, as far as the school schedule.
Yeah. So our game was 7:30 in the morning. We started. We had a point in time that we began, and 7:30 in the morning started when everybody was there. Unless everybody was there, it didn't start. So they were all accountable to get each other up and down there and awake enough, ready, go. And the reason that was important because we had it set up for them to be able to end around 12:30. So it was roughly a 5-hour game plan, and working through this writing, math, reading, math, writing, throw in their extra 30 minutes of exercise, that kind of sequence inside of time, giving them time limits. But if they violated the time limit, look, if they beat the time limit, they can move on and get through school earlier. So if they did their reading, number of pages or number of problems in math, we had a way we set that up. They got through early, Isn't that cool? And so everything was good. They got through early. If they went long, then whatever they didn't finish, we'd move on to the next thing in the sequence they'd have to do in the afternoon. And in time, they got pretty good at getting it done kind of when it needed to be done. We had math on Saturdays. And what was funny about Saturdays was the only thing we had. And once they had done it, they could go play and enjoy their day. Everybody did their math faster on Saturdays. I remember correctly. They just were all magic about that. And we also, Saturday was a context in which we would do service projects. So if you found a service project, pick up trash on the road or help with the church or some service project with Boy Scouts or something, well, that turned out to be a thing that would replace math. You didn't have to do math if you went and served on Saturdays. So that was another piece of our game. So what questions do you have? I don't see anybody typing anything. And that's the technology we've gotten right now. What questions about scheduling, or if you're finished with scheduling, what questions do you have about other stuff? Uh, how to figure out math problems, how to do vocabulary, how reading comprehension works, how to cultivate manners in children, how to organize the holidays, how to teach offline subjects. I'm just saying stuff because it's all stuff we had to face and fiddle with and fool with. What do you do about sickness? What do you do about when kids are sick? You know, how does school work then? I don't know. I'm making up stuff. But if you have something about scheduling, that would be in particularly awesome because it's kind of what we're thinking about.
One of the things we also did is we did our school schedule all year round. We did that in the summer also. And so that really helped to maintain the routine. They would still get up at the same time. And we had bedtimes for the children that changed as they, got older. Part of
Exactly.
scheduling.
Yeah. And that we like to have different bedtimes for the kiddos because we wanted them to learn responsibility. And we felt with age came privilege, as it were. Isn't that right, Jody?
Right.
Okay, so now Abigail's asking, did you let your kids work ahead of their schedule? I have one who wants to speed through. That's a great question. Jody?
We did let them do, like Fred was saying, if they got done, say they were working on math for an hour. If they got done with that day's assignment in 40 minutes, they could go on to the next thing. And if, but you need to just make sure they're actually doing quality work and not just, speeding through just for the sake of speeding through.
Yeah.
Are they really getting it done the way you want them to do it?
Exactly. I would add to that, sometimes in certain subjects, math does this, especially when you start a new book because they're reviewing the previous year, that speeding happens for a while, but then it slows down. And so understanding that game, not everybody speeds through. Honestly, most of us, when we struggle with something, we learn it better. Speeding through something that comes that quick to us, usually we aren't really nailing it down. Sometimes it's the wrestling through that makes it really work.
And sometimes if they're just really dashing through some things, maybe they're not being challenged enough with what they've, with their subject.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's and this is a really good question. In fact, I don't know what you're going to say, Jody. What did you do for sick days? We find reading can be done by a sick child.
Yeah, it's always interesting to figure out how sick somebody is, and usually could do that sick test by, well, nothing's gonna, if you're sick enough and you don't feel like you can do school, you're not doing anything the rest of the day. You're not gonna all of a sudden be well in the afternoon or the evening. So that would help kind of discern how sick they are. And and how often that's happening too. Our kids weren't sick that much, but yes, I think if you wanted to have doing reading, but if you wanted them just to be resting and be a sick day, then that's what it is, and it's
Yeah, I agree. My sense was if they're really sick, they're sick. Let them get well. Haven't you ever tried to do things when you're sick? You can do it, but the quality isn't that good. Some of our kids, Laura, when she was sick, she was really actually sick. That became very clear to me. Others, feeling pitiless is a little different than being sick. But for the most part, I think that plan Jody implemented of, look, then you're sick, and you're not going to get to do much else, not play with friends, not anything. And by and large, that had them settle down, get well, and not do much scamming of us, as it were. Did your kid did your kids ever scam you, Jody?
Oh, I think Holmes admits that he did once, but I don't know of anybody else. The other thing, I mean, the sick, uh, I mean, you can just kind of tell too how often are they sick, and you know how badly do they feel, and but it's okay just to be off. But I think as they got older, they didn't want to get behind very much, so you know, not
Exactly.
so
It was not worth it to them. If you put in five
yeah.
hours, you're through by 12:30, and lo and behold, you got the rest of the day to party, play, whatever you want to do. It's kind of a good gig because we're not having to. They're not doing homework. They're not spending that extra time. We weren't torturing them. They're just trying to learn. Okay. Did you take breaks throughout the year? If so, how long were they? Well, we took breaks, and it varied as they aged. We adjusted a little bit, but breaks basically, even on vacation, as brutal as that is, kind of like the sickness thing. You can at least read on vacation. But we didn't like them to lose out too much, especially we had to make a long drive across country to get from Texas to Alabama. So they would do math in the car. We had a certain number of days of math, certain amount of reading we'd like them to do, or have them a book to get through. But so by and large, they'd still have a break in there. Holidays, we would start like a Christmas holiday, and it'd go for a period. What happened as the children got older, they were involved in youth group in their church, and that's how they connected to other kids, and it overlapped with kids in the public school system. So as a result, what we did is we started kind of getting some of those breaks to correspond to the public school system. And then other things we might, like Martin Luther King Day. I always let the kids take off if they'd get up and watch a movie and talk about it with me. So I might have them watch, one of the ones I liked was one called Boycott, um, about the Montgomery boycott in like 1954 or so. And their grandparents lived in Montgomery, so it was especially relevant for them. But it's such a well done movie. It lets you talk about race relations and what it was like and what was going on. So we might pull tricks like that, but the rest of it might be based on what they're doing. If they had summer camp, they didn't do school during summer camp for scout camp or something else. So it kind of played out in that way, far more rigid when they were little, far more flexible when they were older. What else, Jody?
Right, it did because we did realize, okay, this is when they can see the public school kids that are off, or even the private school kids. But when they were little, we probably didn't take as many breaks. But we would do normally it would be 2 weeks at Christmas and a week spring break. And as I said, in the summer, if we're home, if you were the rule kind of was if you're home, not away at scout camp or whatever obviously, we you were doing school because you got up and you did it and you were through by 12:30. Now, if there was an exception, I'm going to spend the night out with a friend. Well, then, if it was during the week, then that sometimes we would say yes, and then they would need to come home in the afternoon and do their school. And then when we would go on because sometimes we would be visiting in Alabama for maybe 3 weeks. Well, we didn't take off completely from school during that 3 weeks. They had to do some reading, some math, some writing, and then we would throw in some just interesting things, maybe science type things or art type things that went along with what we were doing. And you know what? Our kids survived.
Jody, let me interject something really funny. And then when they got older and like they're on vacation with us in college, for example, or late high school if we didn't require it, but especially college, guess what they did for a good part of their vacation? They'd read a lot and they all wrote a lot.
Oh yeah, that is true. Our kids till today, well, on vacation, they consider that is a great time to read and write.
Yeah.
To them, and really they don't. I mean, our youngest one is starting college this year. All the others that are out of college, nobody. Oh, I can't believe y'all made us do this. I can't believe, they all seem fine about it, and we made enough breaks, you know, enough time off and enough exceptions that it was cool.
Well, and the trick was we made it matter of fact. You know,
Definitely.
we're just what we do. You grow up, you can do what you do. This is just how we do it. It's not a big deal. Occasionally they wanted to go to school. Holmes went and checked out school one day with his friend. He went on a field trip. But pretty much I could get them to sit down and do the math of what school involved, about how many hours a day you're in school and how many hours of homework and special projects and all. And they realized that they were getting as good or better an education in half the time. And none of them, after they thought that through, ever, to my knowledge, wanted to sign up for something different. Do you remember, Jody?
Right. No, correct. That is correct. There's one there for you to answer about business, and then this is a good one, the extracurriculums.
Okay. So I'll do the business and you do the extracurricular. Now, I don't know exactly what we did in home business that Jeannie might be referring to. So, but it's obviously since we sell a writing course, et cetera, we obviously did home business. So the way we did that was we would do it in times other than our actual work day. So I had a job. I pastored a couple of churches. The last church was pretty sizable in terms of the population, the staff, 16 staff, and there were probably 1,200 or 1,400 people involved with that church. And so it took a little bit of time, but the church understood that I had, these things I was doing and on the side, and that didn't bother them at all. We had an agreement, and as a result, basically, I would just work on it at times I would schedule in. I would have times that's when I did that. It's y'all. It's very similar to how you go eat lunch with people. You set up a lunchtime and you go to lunch and you get there and you order something and then you eat lunch and you talk and eventually lunch has to end and everybody has to go back to work. Well, you can set that in for things you work on too, whether it's business, your own learning or studies or something you want to add or do. We all are capable of doing that. And if you'll just treat the time you work on those things the same way that you treat an appointment with a friend, it usually works out pretty well, assuming you really want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then you're going to keep saying, I want to do this, I want to do that, but something is holding you back. You need to get that what holding you back out of the way so you can go work on it. Okay, Jody, what's the next one?
Well, yes, we only did math. We only did math on Saturdays. We didn't do any other subjects on Saturdays. That was one question. And yes, even in the teen years, they were through 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock. We had, yes, we stuck with that schedule the whole time.
Repeat that. You need to say the whole thing because nobody.
It said, sorry, they're not seeing it. Sorry. Were you finished with school by 12:30, even in the teen years? And 12:30, 1 o'clock, maybe closer to 1 at that point because there were some a little bit harder subjects and stuff. But basically, yes, to answer that. And then extracurricular with all our kids.
Hang on.
Go.
Hang on. On the teen years, I can tell you watching Brooks is fresh in my mind. Once we added, we had to add language and some other things that didn't fit in our normal sequence, and he did those outside of. We mixed some of them in, but he also had the latitude to work on them when he wanted to, but they had to be done. He had a kind of a test each week, and he could figure it out. So I think Brooks worked in the afternoon or some evenings, that kind of thing. So he began to experience what it was like to have a subject with a deadline on it, right?
Yeah. Right. All right. I had forgotten about that.
Extracurricular.
They different times did different things. We wanted them all to experience some art and some form of music, and sports was an option. What we didn't do though is everybody didn't do a sport every year and a music lesson every year, and we didn't overbook the extracurricular. The boys all did Boy Scouts, but not Cub Scouts. They did Boy Scouts when they were 11. So that actually is usually in the evening. But like I said, we didn't do Cubs. We started with the Boy Scouts. We wanted them to experience some form of music. So at different times, different kids took lessons, but not everybody all the way up. Same thing with sports. We let them experience some sports. Our kids weren't particularly into sports that much. Our daughter Laura actually she played soccer for about, I don't know, Fred, 5 years.
And tennis.
And tennis. And so I think, I mean, we just made it work mainly because they weren't all doing all these things all the time. Fred, what do you want to say about?
Well, and it varied with their interests. I mean, look, if a child has a real interest in something, you want to cultivate and encourage it. But, forcing that kind of stuff, I guess I would say you do need to do a measure of forcing. There needs to be a certain amount of, you've got to go taste and see. You got to go taste youth group or some civic thing, or getting involved. Brooks did volunteerism. And this comes in handy for getting them in college, because colleges look at that sort of thing as well. So I would just say that cultivating their interest, and the easiest way to figure out your child's interest is not their passion so much as what they find easy. Things that come easy if it comes easy to them to do art's something, and if music something, and you can go down the list. There's a hint in what comes easy to us, because it means there's a measure of talent there, and very normally passion's a part of it too. All right, so
I want to throw in one more thing about the extracurricular, Fred, if I may. I think a lot of times in America, you think you're not a good parent if if every sports season they're not doing a sport, and if they're not getting to experience. Well, you can't experience every musical instrument. I mean, the things that are available in America can overwhelm you, and you can't do it all, time-wise, money-wise, energy-wise. And you know what? Your kid's going to be okay with that, and they're really not going to miss out.
Right, and in our context, our kids, they were all not going to be great athletes. We knew that. Tripp's cerebral palsy made that clear. The others either didn't have an interest or whatever. Holmes is, I think, relatively athletic, and if a child is really into athletics, like my friend, our friends, the Tebows, had a son named Timmy. Bob had a son named Timmy. He kept telling me about that, liked sports, and he was good at football, and kept saying he's really good at football, and it turned out he wasn't too bad. If you have a Timmy Tebow, then you really want to encourage and cultivate that. But with 5 kids, and not being, going to be great in athletics, we were not just pushing them to vicariously live out an athletic lifestyle, but we were trying to cultivate things that built their character, or things that were of special interest to them. And I think that's indeed the way to go. So what I want to do, Kim asked a really important question that I like a lot, and I want to mention about college. However, I'm going to save that for the last. I'm going to answer these others, and we're going to be done. So, Jenny, real quick. I'm sorry, Allison said, forgot if you said what time you start in the morning. We always start at 7:30 in the morning, because we're trying to end at 12:30, roughly by lunch. So meal was a motivation, and so it created boundary, and they sort of had the afternoon to work. And we mixed other things in when they were littler. There was a household maintenance time. We didn't call it chores. We call it household maintenance, etc. But it was 7:30 a.m. That seemed to work fine, and the kids, depending on age, had different bedtimes. Jen says, what if you have a life schedule that is unpredictable and different from day to day? That is my situation, and I cannot change it. I'm having trouble with planning school tasks and getting compliance in some areas. Any suggestions? Well, the complexity is going to be the age of your kids and all the rest, and sometimes schedules are that way. What I would say is you're still wanting to go back to the sequence issue. And so if a day's disruptive, see, I guess what I'm thinking is you get your math done. This is what I would think. You get your writing done. Then you get your math done. And then you get your reading done. And then you go back to your writing. And then you go back to your math and you go back to your reading, because that sequence could be followed even if you're interrupted. That's the way life goes. So I would stress to you to try to think in terms of sequence. And honestly, if you want to really figure it out, think of the sequence or whatever your subjects are. You may have different subjects. That's great. But get the sequence down and then record how much time is being spent on it for about 2 weeks. If you'll do that and look at it, you're going to be able to see a pattern of what's going on so you can tweak it, improve it, or feel good about it. But mostly it's a matter of sticking with the subject, the amount you want to spend on a subject till it's done, and move to the next, whether you're interrupted or not. Does that make sense? Jody, anything you want to add there?
And then the more, we don't know their ages or anything, but the more independent you can get the children, if it's just you, that your life is unpredictable, but they can still be doing school as much as they can on their own. So even if you're not right there to be with them, can they still go ahead and do the schedule? Now,
Right. This year, Jody and I went to Alabama for almost 2 weeks because my mother was ill and then passed away, and Brooks got his school done. He got settled into a system, much older, but you're working towards that kind of independence with the kids where they know, here's my work, I need to go get it done, because they're going to need to do that in college too. And they're going to need to do it in a job. So it's a training game. They don't start out that way. Some do, and that usually they have issues, but that's that's all cool too. Anything else there, Jody?
no, that's good.
Okay, so this last question. Since your kids continue school in the summer, they probably finish high school early. Did you let any of your kids go to college early? I have a darling daughter, or DD, who is advanced and will graduate next year at 16. We're not sure if she's ready for the university away from home. Okay, so I can only tell you how we thought about it. And maybe it was right and maybe it was wrong. I don't know. But it's still what we did. So first, our kids really didn't finish high school early because we just kept feeding them stuff. What they did is they finished their normal curriculum early. And then I got my shelves and pulled out a bunch of books that I really am very fond of, and added those to their list. So they read a particular reading list, and our kids also helped develop their own list when they got to that stage. They would add books in they wanted to read. And then we would find other things in mathematics for them. So it might be a programming course, or Brooks went off and studied something called Mathematica, did a summer camp, and now he's paid to do programming with this. So there are things to do. But Jody introduced me to David Elkind. Do you remember him, Jody?
Yes. Yeah.
The Hurried Child. And it was talking about the challenge of how much hurrying we do. And I get that people are advanced, and I wouldn't fault anybody for any of it. But I sit here in a really different category with a lot of the way people think about college. And you're free to disagree. It's okay. I may be all wet here. But a couple of things are really kind of convictions of mine. And the first is, all of this parallel education we do on the altar of saving money, I think often might be a mistake. And the reason I believe that is because it has underneath it the assumption that education's the same in every school. And I don't believe that. I believe the upper tier colleges are upper tier for a reason, never mind their politics and such. I do think all the mid-tier schools, the big mid-tier schools, are still really fine educationally. But it's difficult for me to understand why a community college is offering you the exact same thing as Michigan State or Michigan. It's just not going to work in my understanding, partly because those mid-tier schools, those big ones, the professors were trained by some really bright minds out there. And so as a result, what I thought about and worked on, Jody and I did with the kids, was to prepare them for college life, but not rush them, rush them out of, not trying to rush them out of school, out of high school too quickly. Brooks, in particular, wanted to have his high school experience. He wanted to mentor some younger high school boys or junior high boys. He wanted to finish that process. He didn't perceive himself to be in a hurry. He was able to do a lot of things on the side, but he really saw moving to college as a different step in his life. And he wanted, and I think all the kids were this way, they really wanted to go ahead and make that part of their life that part of their life. They weren't trying to do college at home, and we wanted them to have that too. We wanted them to be able to go off and start building their own life and having accountability and relationships apart from us, still connected, but we got them ready, and we thought they're mature enough and ready to go. If you're not sure if she's ready, she's probably not, unless you can get the criteria together and be able to evaluate it. What are you going to say, Judy?
Well, that was what I was originally even just reading the question. If you are hesitating that she's ready, she probably isn't, and especially going away to university. Now, a little bit of contradiction to Fred, but if you really feel like, well, she's done all the schoolwork we want her to do, she could do start some college courses in the community or online or something like that. But there's also, if you put your thinking to it, there's maybe some other things we want. She may be through with this normal quote unquote curriculum that people go through, but what else might she use this time, another year or two? What else might we want to do? Maybe we want to work on some practical life skills more, or maybe we want to do something like computer programming, or just something that's really different from, if you feel like, well, she's through. Now, the only thing there is if you wait too long, you might lose some of those skills if you're not still working on math to some extent. But what is her interest? Does she maybe want to really focus on some musical instrument for a while? Or, I'm just kind of brainstorming here. But I doubt that at 16 she's ready to go away to university. And she's your child, and if she is, but those are just things I'm thinking about.
Well, I don't take the contradiction that way. If she wants to take some classes, and there are things online, Udemy has a lot of classes, and there are all kinds of things you can find. Taking classes to learn, and bear in mind, our understanding of education is learning how to learn. You go to college to learn how to learn. You don't go to college to get a degree so you can get a job. That's our thinking. So, Tripp gets a degree in art, studio art, and now he is a pretty significant level business systems analyst. I don't know how that works either, but he learned the creative process. You start with nothing, and you start with what you got. You get a picture of what you want. You start with nothing, and you take a step, make an adjustment, take a step like a paint stroke, and you teach yourself stuff. That's what he learns to do. Well, it relates in here in college to the idea of the basics. This overlaps with the other piece I want to mention, which is getting the basics out of the way at a junior college or whatever. See, there's got to be an assumption in there that the basics at all schools are the same. And I, for the life, I scratch my head on that one, because I cannot imagine that the basics at the University of Texas are the same as the basics at San Antonio College. I'm not demeaning, I'm not picking on anything. I especially admire people who are kind of the first generation to ever go to school. My dad and my uncle were the first generations to ever go to college. And they went to good colleges, intermediate, and they, set in motion lots of good things. They did quite well. I'm not saying you can't get a good education, but inside of a university strategy, the basics at that university play into the later things you do. And it just strikes me that why don't you go and have the real experience of college instead of it being an add-on. Now, we weren't scared of our kids getting corrupted, turned into, you know, uh, strange, weird, liberal, um, crazy, bizarre, innovative, socialistic, something weird. Just make up some story. We weren't worried about that. Atheists, you know. We felt like we had enough grounding, and then we felt very clearly that it was their choice about what they do in life, and so we had them ready to go. But it made the whole experience, starting even in the basics, where they could find out if they were missing anything, needed to add on, learn how that system worked, learn what that game was with those professors. And so they were able to embrace and experience the whole college experience. And they built friendships that way, starting in that foxhole together. That freshman year is a big relationship builder, especially as you start learning and getting through it together. So I guess what I'm saying is, again, if a child's not ready for school, don't send them to school. Just think about education. What else can you add on to their math? What more reading? What more opportunities? What specialties can they study? If you want to study college stuff, I think that's great. I just don't know if I would be doing it in my mind is trying to get a parallel degree. A lot of people disagree with me. More power to them. But I think if you'll study the impact and how well people do in the nature of life, you're going to find consistently this double degree at home saving money game didn't really pan out. It panned out financially, but didn't pan out in career choices to position these kids to make the contributions they probably wanted. That stuff still happens at a different level when you're at a maturity level and a brain and heart and soul readiness to get into the game with other people who are at that same stage. And by the way, that's one of the funny things. The college you go to winds up challenging you because you're in there with people that really can think where you are and a little beyond. And that kind of challenge is going to really stretch you as a human. Any final things there, Jody?
I don't think so.
All right. Hey, this was really great. Sorry we kept you a little longer, but you know, as time goes on, we may want to keep going. These were great questions, great opportunity. We'll post this for replay, and we probably won't do this next week. Laura's getting married, so I think I'm going to have to be busy with married stuff. But that second week you'll hear from us, and we'll be on to another one. And if this is helpful, spread the word. Thanks. Y'all take care. God bless.
Thanks. Bye-bye.